seminar and 2 will be on Upanishads.
Hari Om. Sadasiva Samanamham Shankaracharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Narayana Samanamham Acharya Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Naham Karta Harihi Karta Tad Puja Parinchakaram Yadyat Karma Karo Tattadagaram Thamno Tavarajanam. Om Namo Bhagavate Sivananda. Om Namo Bhagavate Chidananda. Om Namo Bhagavate Krishnaya. Heartfelt salutations and adorations at the lotus feet of Mother. This worship we are doing from today, Navratri, so it's a very, very happy coincidence. And we are sitting here on the bank of Ganga. Ganga is also our mother. Guru is also our mother. And so auspicious Navratri day, where this is the opportunity of talking to you there. Swami said so many things about me. I am also a student like you, although studied science only, but yoga and Vedanta spirituality I have learned from my childhood. So whatever little I have learned, maybe experience, I just want to share with you in a very humble way. Swami said that we can start with Bhagavad Gita. And Bhagavad Gita is also our mother. We call it Gita Mata. So we can start with that first. So, what is Bhagavad Gita? As everybody knows, in a very usual way, Bhagavad Gita is a dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjuna. And where does it appear? The dialogue appears in Kurukshetra is true, but prior to that, it was there in Mahabharata Bhishma Parva. So it's basically accepted from that. It's a part of Mahabharata Bhishma Parva. So in that Mahabharata Bhishma Parva, chapter 25 to 42, this Bhagavad Gita is contained. So it has a close relationship between Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita. As you know, there is a tradition, that whenever this, even Gurudev Swami Shivaji Maharaj also, when this particular book on Bhagavad Gita, which is very simple commentary, if you read that, it's also essentially written in Shankar Bhashya. Even if some of you are not so much inclined or don't have so much time to read Shankar Bhashya, even if you read the commentary on Bhagavad Gita or Swami Shivaji Maharaj also, it gives the essence of Shankar Bhashya. That's what I felt. He also begins, by offering prayers to Bhagavan Vyasa. He did a great service to mankind, Sanatana Dharma, by offering the Prasthana Trayi. Right? So, in that Prasthana Trayi, we have got that Upanishads, then Brahma Sutra. So, Brahma Sutra is whenever you have little lack of clarity about the relationship between Jiva, Jagata and Jagdish, how are related. And apparently you may find that there are some dissimilarities or not concurring statements. But if you look at a higher level, those apparent differences are reconciled. So Brahma Sutra is doing that great service. Whatever apparent differences that we may see in the Upanishad study will be reconciled. In our life also it happens like that, That at some lower level we might see some differences. But as you go up the ladder, we see that those were apparent differences. And they can be reconciled into a higher truth. So the moment you perceive a higher truth, the differences which they appear automatically get reconciled. That is the thing between Upanishad and Brahma Sutra. And both are called Brahma Vidya scriptures. And Brahma Vidya is what? That talks about the supreme reality. We call it Brahman, all pervading Brahman. Same thing in Vedanta is called as Atman, which you experience as an individual. So the science or the content or the meaning of Brahma Vidya is explained in Upanishads and Brahma Sutra. Same thing is there in Bhagavad Gita also. And what more is there in Bhagavad Gita? When you say Brahma Vidya is already there, right? So everything is there in Vishadas, it's also there in Brahma Sutra also. So what more Bhagavad Gita offers? When you say Brahma Vidya, Yoga Shastra. So it is not only about the end objective, but the Bhagavad Gita is also a very lucid explanation of the means to reach to it. So in life, two things are important, The end means the ultimate goal and the means. What is more important? What is more important? Both are more important. But the stage at which we are, the means are more important. Because the all spiritual or any journey begins from known to unknown. So from where we are to where we want to go, where we should be going. So means are very important. Means have to be very sacred, and then only they can take us to the end. So in that case, in normal context, when you say Yoga Vedanta for a academy, here is your calling, correct? So Vedanta refers more to Brahma Vidya, or the end objective, or the ultimate goal. And Yoga is more about the means. More, it's not a very sharp distinction. Even in Brahma Vidya also you will find means. But largely speaking, you can say that. And that is how the Yoga Vedanta Forest Academy came into being. And Bhagavad Gita, in that sense, is a beautiful scripture that talks as much about the Brahma Vidya as Vishadas, nothing less. But it also expounds, it also explains the means whereby a man can reach from his present position to the ultimate position. So that is the path on which we have to travel, correct? And we will talk later, but in Bhagavad Gita also, it is called Swadharma. There is one word called Swadharma, correct? I was to talk later, but just it came to me right now, so I am saying right now. One of the followers of Mahatma Gandhi, a very great thinker, Acharya Vinoba Bhave. He has also written a beautiful commentary on Bhagavad Gita. And in Gujarati, there is a very good book called Gita Pravachanam. Gita Pravachanam. I don't know, there has to be English version of that. I have not gone through it. And then he mentions, that the entire essence, or quintessence, if you want to call it, of Bhagavad Gita can be circumscribed in only 3 words. This is the vision of great people. We can talk for hours together. We can write 100 lectures together. But you can't put it in a few words just away. Gurudev puts or give you immediate realize like that. So they say greatest truths are simplest. Only those people who experience the truth, they can put it in very simple. Ordinary people will speak in very complicated. Only realized people can speak in very simple. That's their beauty. So he says there are only 3 things which you need to understand about Bhagavad Gita. And one thing is immortality of the soul, Atma ki Amar. And if that is known, there is no problem. And that is what we are. That is what Bhagavad Gita says. But the only problem is we either do not know that we are a soul, or we know that we are soul plus something. That is called as a spirit involved in matter. We will come to that very shortly. But the problem is, the reality is, one and non-dual, Brahman or Atman is the only thing that exists. Nothing else exists. That is what the scripture says. And that is eternal. So, eternal or immortal nature of the soul. That is the core message of Bhagavad Gita. And if this is known, there is no problem. Right? That doesn't happen. Why it doesn't happen? That also we can see. The second thing is temporariness or ephemeralness of the body. That is how the right hand we have your Hindi, correct? That the body which we know is not only this body. This is subtle, this is gross body, stool shape. And there is also subtle body inside. So gross body largely, is prone to decay, prone to decomposition. We know modern science principle, every cell disintegrates and merges into, they are recycled like that. So anything that comes into being, Jata stays home with you, has to come to an end. So only thing which did not come into being, Anadi, that only can be Ananta. But whatever comes into being has to end someday. So the temporariness, fragility, frugality of the body, that is the second thing. We need to understand that. And because we don't understand that, we get attuned to it, and that is how the problem is. The two fundamental principles are there. Eternal nature of the soul, temporary or the ephemeral nature of the body. The subtle body is not that temporal. Because even after this death, it continues for many more months, right? And the third thing he said is indispensability of Swadharma. So, you may call, in Hindi they call Swadharma ki abhadyata. So that is something which is inevitable. We have to follow that Swadharma. So what is Swadharma? The whole thing came from that particular word. That Swadharma, Dharma has got different meanings. In Bhagavad Gita also. One of the meaning of Dharma is the supreme universal self can also be called as the Dharma. Our own duty, so many meanings are there. And when in Bhagavad Gita we read the word Dharma, it means Swadharma. So something which is meant for what it is which I need to do to reach to my goal. That's what is called as Swadharma, what is called as the yoga. So he said, how do you understand Swadharma? If everybody cannot have the same Swadharma, because we are all at different level of evolution, we have got different inner state, so what is our Swadharma? So he made a very simple statement, that everybody from deep within knows, where a person stands. So put that point at one point. Be very honest, be very impartial. Your introspection to find out what are my limitations, what are my strengths, where do I stand. That is one point. And the second thing is, with all this study of the scriptures, the gurus, everything which we do, we have some goal for us in our mind. It again has to be same, but it can be interpreted differently by different people. Because we cannot have the supreme goal grasped the same way. So this is where I wish to go. So this is where I am. This is where I wish to go. This is my datum point, starting point, and this is my destination. You join that 2 points, and that becomes Swadharma. But that's the beauty in such a simple way. He is able to tell you what is Swadharma. You can't read a book on that, what is Swadharma. Every scripture will say, every saint will say differently. Ultimately, Mahapurush has said, Sivananda Maharaj also said that the scriptures will tell you various things, they will guide you. Bhagavad Gita commentary by different sages will tell you, but ultimately every individual has to work out what does it subjectively mean for me. What does it subjectively mean? How can I put it as a part of my life? It again cannot be same. The recipe has to be different. So this is the whole thing called Swadharma, and that is what we all need to do. That is how Bhagwan Vyasa we offer pronouns to him. And there he says, Namostute Vyasa Vishwala Buddhe, Punnaravinda, Yatapatra Netra. They are just adoring him. That Vishwala Buddha, he has got a broad intellect. Punnaravinda, Yatapatra Netra, eyes are just like a full-blown lotus. Erattvaya, Bhartate Purna Pratipalito Jnanamaya Pradipaha. Matlab, the knowledge, lamp of knowledge is lit from within. And what is the oil? The oil, he says, is Bharata Purna. That is Mahabharata. So he says Mahabharata is the oil of that lamp which is lit by Bhagavad Gita. What he wants to convey is Bhagavad Gita has to be interpreted in light of the developments which have taken place in Mahabharata. And when you connect it with that, you will understand the glory of Bhagavad Gita. Minus that story of Mahabharata, Bhagavad Gita will not tell what idea is supposed to be. And if you read Bhagavad Gita alone as a song, that also will not be helpful. So both are important. Reading Mahabharata without Bhagavad Gita will not serve the purpose. Reading full purpose. Reading Bhagavad Gita without Mahabharata. So both are complementary. History and the song. And that is how the context becomes very complete. So that's the whole thing. That is what Bhagavad Gita all about. As you all know, Bhagavad Gita, so many people have said that it applies at all times. It applies to people of all age. It applies to people of all ethnicities, all nationalities, everything like that. So how can it be like that? How can a song be universal? Because you can't find any solution like, and today we see Bhagavad Gita being interpreted differently. We have management classes also. They will teach how to make good management in Bhagavad Gita. Mahatma Gandhi also used to say that all problems of my life, I used to get answers from Bhagavad Gita. It was right thing, But that, how can that be a solution for everybody all the time? Normally anything which you read will have some limited applicability. That is because it is a universal song. It is sung by whom? It is sung by universal. And to whom? To individual. Actually, in a philosophical sense, it is a song of universal to universal. But for all practical purposes, we can say it is a song of universal to individual. We will see the metaphor Bhagavad Gita, what Arjuna and Krishna represents. The individual is not different from universal. But individual has assumed himself, believed himself to be different from the universe. And that is the cause of his sorrow. That is the cause of his psychological misadjustment. And that is the cause of his shoka, the cause of the grief. So individuals that we know ourselves to be, in essence, are not different from God. But because of certain reasons, that it has happened to us, that's the problem. So the problems of Arjuna is because of ignorance. And ignorance is of two types. What are they? One is ignorance about the reality of the world. We may know from politics, economics, finance, geography, weather, so many things, and we can find solution, in different books, in different texts. But we do not need to know about ignorance of all the subjects. Because there are infinite subjects. And even if you don't know them, no great harm is going to take place. Correct? So we should try to free ourselves from only that much ignorance, which is necessary for leading a happy, healthier life. Supposing there are thousands of diseases. Now why do we know about every disease here? But supposing we are affected from some disease, naturally we will learn more about it and that will help us in coming out of it. So ignorance about the field that is called Kshetra. Ignorance about the 13th chapter they call Kshetra and Kshetragna. So ignorance about the field, all manifested world. We don't need to know everything. Just it helps, but only to the extent necessary. But the other ignorance is what? Ignorance of the self, who I am. Kshetragna. That is what they are calling Bhagavad Gita. So this ignorance is bothersome. This ignorance is troublesome. And this ignorance is the cause of all maladies and all sufferings which a mankind is suffering. And you cannot escape not knowing yourself. Normally we understand ourselves in a very different way as our personal life. And we write our CV. The longer the CV, lesser the chance we know about who I am. Because you are more lost in my physical, in my mental, in my intellectual, psychological. I am a psychophysical well-being. But beyond that psychophysical well-being, or beyond that psychophysical being, I am the spirit in essence. I am the soul in essence. And since this is not very clear to us, that is how the entire problems which a mankind faces. So when you say that Bhagavad Gita is meant for everybody, it only means it addresses the problems of ignorance. And which ignorance? Ignorance of the self. And that is how all the problems in life arises. So we will take that part also. So that is how, and we talked a little more about it just now also. So now that is how they say that all scriptures are good. We can think of anything for our Swadhyaya, that's also fine. But so many saints, so many realized sages have always said that even study of Bhagavad Gita itself is enough. Even if for some reasons you are not able to study the other scripture, that is what Sivananda Maharaj also has said. And even if we are inclined to other things, that's also perfectly okay, because all are complementary. But at least 2 verses in Bhagavad Gita, one has to read, And apparently we feel, that many people think that Bhagavad Gita I have read, I understood, and even if there are some classes there, normally we want to avoid, we think we know it. But I learnt from people who are well versed in Vedanta, who are exponents in Vedanta, I have very preliminary study. They say, that digesting Bhagavad Gita, comprehending Bhagavad Gita in its absolutely quintessential innermost form is more difficult than reading Ashram. That's what they say. Because it contains all the message, it addresses people at all levels of consciousness. And there is always a chance, that we may not be able to grasp the true meaning. So, in one of the books in Bhagavad Gita, Sivananda Maharaj has said, that Avyakta, what is Avyakta, right? So if you read that Vedanta, the Bhagavad Gita, the Avyakta word will be used for Para-Brahman, the supreme reality, which is basically in the Niraka, Avyakta. And the same Avyakta word will be used for Prakriti or the Maya. Maybe someday you can try to see that Prakriti or Maya is not something which is to be seen as completely different from Brahman. So Maya and Brahman, we perceive them to be different. And today is Mother's Worship Day, so let us recall that. And that Swami Jayant Maharaj has so beautifully described the whole thing in one of his books. I tell you, it's a feast to read, God as Mother. And because you are here in the Navratri days, I very sincerely appeal you to go through that book, God as Mother. In 9 days, what a significance of worship is there. But in the preliminary part, he explains that Brahman and Maya, they apparently, we see them as different, but Maya or Parashakti is the power of the Para-Brahman. So one is Maya, one is Mayavi, who possesses the power. And they are like the two terminals. Supposing there is a rod is there, on the two sides there are two terminals. On one side you may say that there is Para-Brahman, on the other side you may say manifested world. So the link between the manifested world and Para-Brahman is that is imponderable, indescribable power of one. That's called as Maya. And in Bhagavad Gita also, we see that Apara Shakti and this Apara and Paraprakti, like that they have described. So Jayant Maharaj beautifully explains, that they are distinct without a difference. Look at the beauty of the words, They are distinct without a difference. You cannot conceive of Para-Brahman without this imponderable mother power. Otherwise, nothing will exist. You and I cannot see, talk, nothing will happen. And Parashakti without Para-Brahman cannot exist. So, worshipping God in Nirakara form is one of Vedanta worship, and worshipping God as Divine Mother. And that's the same Mother in three different forms. Why do they say? That has got different significance. But that is how that whole thing is there, and that is how we need to understand that. So, Bhagavad Gita, as I say, that so beautiful description of Prakriti, Brahma, everything is there. And unless and until, it is not that we can't read alone. We can read alone. But we necessarily have to take the help of the self-realized sage. What is that slogan in Bhagavad Gita? Tad vitti pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. Tad vitti, pranipatena means offering humble reverence. Unless and until we have got reverence, for a person, we cannot learn anything from that. Tad vitti pranipatena pariprashnena. What does it mean? Pariprashnena means you just ask a question. Asking a question means what? Truly it should reflect your genuine concern about the subject. Unless and until that the question has to be such, that the person will be impelled to answer it. He has to know the question has come from within. See, jocularly in Vedanta class, I have heard this, often I say this also, right? They say, that there are some people who only found a question. They ask question and they will see how they are feeling, what good question is that. They call it Prashnananda, what they was like that, So they are only happy in asking a question. They will not be interested in what answering. So that kind of question is not going to help. Prashna has to be such, that you ask another man, you I have to tell you right now, I cannot win even for a moment. Your jignasa is so high. So that is the pranipatena. Pariprashnena. So pranipatena, and sevaya. So sevaya is what? Sevaya is not only physical service. But seva is you obey the teachings and the message of your guru or the preceptor in later stage. That is called as seva. Tatvidhi pranipatya parikrishna seva upadeshanti jnanam jnanam tattvadarshana. And then that particular can even the same will be able to guide you. So without that, if we do, what will happen? We may go to a certain point, we might find some confusion, again we have to come back. So when you are going to a unknown road, you climb some point and then you know it's not right road, you have to come back. So that kind of thing is not wise because our life is limited. We don't have unlimited options. Always good idea. You know, Shraddhavan labhate jnanam tatpara chaitanya. One more version is there in Bhagavad Gita also. That Shraddhavan labhate jnanam tatpara, which is tatpara and chaitanya. Jnanam vidva prasanti machana nivechati. There are two verses in Bhagavad Gita which explain that why going to a Brahmanishta and Kshatriya Guru is important. I think these two words also you know. So Kshatriya is the one who is well versed in the subject. Just as any secular subject, when you want to go, you go to a person who is studied. So that's called as Kshatriya. And Brahmanishta is the one who has experience. And other subjects, if I teach history, economics, philosophy, or even medical science, I don't necessarily have to experience. Maybe in some case they also experience, you know. But then in a limited way. But here, when we talk about the self, when we talk about who I, it is one's own intuitive, direct experience. So that is how Brahmanishta Guru, very, very teacher. And all of you are all very fortunate that we are sitting in some such sacred place where this can come to us. It's all about this Guru. Now, when you see that metaphor in Bhagavad Gita, every time we see that, that very peculiar figure, that there is a chariot and the Lord Krishna is there, Arjuna is there, and then you see so many things. So the metaphor is there. It is also there in Upanishad also. Ratha is also there. So what does it represent here actually? So here you have got the Kurukshetra, first of all. What the Kurukshetra is, we don't have to go to that UP Kurukshetra. Wherever we see in the world we find Kurukshetra today. No? Everybody for no apparent reasons are conflicting. So Kurukshetra is there everywhere. But Bhagavad Gita talks about Kurukshetra which is within us. And in Kali Yoga, of course it addresses outside problems also. But mainly it addresses within us. That is a Kurukshetra within us. So many different types of contradictions, confusions, very little ideas keep coming. And that is what keeps us bothering. More when we identify with them. It's more about the Kurukshetra, means the inner battle which is going on within that time. Now, the whole thing in Mahabharata happened because of whom? Dhritarashtra. So we'll call him what? Avidya. We'll call him Avidya. So Dhritarashtra is there, we can equate with Avidya or ignorance. Okay? So, do we have ignorance or not? Everybody has got ignorance. If we did not ignorance in the sense, we might know all, which is sort of theoretically not possible, but even if we know all the subjects of the world, still we can be ignorant about ourselves. But that ignorance is there, avidya is there, and avidya is the word which is used for Maya at the individual level. So when you say Maya at the samasti level, Maya ka prabhav Maya, that same thing when it applies to individual level, within this physical structure, that is called as avidya. Correct? So Dhritarashtra is avidya. And because we have the ignorance of the self, we have come as a human. Had we not got this, had we known who we are, then there would have been no birth. So the very fact that we are born as a human, we have again, born and had is again, but then that is still avidya is there. So avidya is Dhritarashtra. Then who else is there? We have got the chariot. The chariot is our body. Then there are horses. So which are the horses? We have got these senses, Jnanendriya and Karmendriya, as we all know, correct? They are also something which we need to understand more about that, correct? Apparently what we see is not the Jnanendriya. When you see this Chakshu, it is not the Indriya. The power that is given to Chakshu is called as the Chakshu. So we have the 5 Karmendriyas and 5 Jnanendriyas. They are the horses. And then you have got the rein. The rein, you understand? Lagam, what you got. So what is that rein? What is rein? Mind, correct. Because ultimately senses are moving around and it is the mind which has to cooperate. If the mind doesn't cooperate, senses will not have a problem. So withdrawal, pratyahara, first step is this, that you can dissociate the mind. If you are eating something, hearing something without mind, it will not do anything to you. So mind is something which is the real. That's one thing. Now who is holding the real? Buddhi. That's fine. So Buddhi is chariot, what we call Sarathi. That is the Buddhi. So Man and Buddhi, these two things are there, right? It is the chariot means the Buddhi which is holding the mind, the real. So Buddhi and Man, are they different things or they are not very different things? They are all part of Antarkara. Right? So inner self, we call Man, Buddhi, Chitta, Ahankara. So it is not completely different, but the different functions which are done by inner self, they are named different. Right? So mind they call Sankalpa, Vikalpa, Atmika. Now you think, you don't think, do this, don't do that, you feel happy, you don't feel unhappy. Those kind of instincts are called as the mind. And the discriminative faculty, that is called as the Buddhi, intellect. So intellect, when you understand that here in form of Sarathi, we call Bhagwan himself is sitting, so it is not an ordinary thing, Buddhi. So Buddhi is something, mind and Buddhi, although they are part of the Antarkarana. But they say that when the mind follows Buddhi, everything is right. Correct? But when the Buddhi follows mind, then all the problems start. So you can also say lower mind, higher mind. And in Vedanta also they are not completely different, although they have different functions like that. Correct? So there are two things are there. So we need two things. One is mind and we need Buddhi. So both of them have to be trained, controlled. One is called Manomaya Kosh, one is called Vijnanamaya Kosh, like that also. Correct? So both are there. And then who is sitting there? Atma, Arjuna is sitting. So he is a final person. Normally we call Bhagavan, we call final. So here we call Arjuna is final. So how do we, this is difficult to understand. Because when you say the Supreme Reality, Bhagavan, you call it as a Sarthi here, Buddhi, and Arjuna is there. So his person, he is a man having problem actually, correct, what we discuss here. And we call him also as the one who writes and he is the control. He says, Bhagavan, do this, that. So how does it explain actually, And then there are so many enemies. So which are the enemies? So all that Antarkarana vrittis which are there, and they keep coming. And how different vrittis come in Antarkarana? There are different vrittis, they keep coming from Antarkarana. Vritti is instinct in English, right? In Hindi I am using the word just to get a closer meaning. So every second it just like a river, it flows and flows. So how does it come from? Where does it come from? Vrittis, कहाँ से उठती है? Desire is one part of vritti. Raga dvesha is one kind of vritti, no? Subconscious mind is also called chitta in a way, They are, chitta is a storehouse of the impression. But chitta is true, but the chitta contains impressions of this birth and previous birth. And impressions are called samskara. Impressions are called samskara. So supposing something happens to you, you enjoy something, a class or anything, then you got a memory. Memory will last for some time, maybe for a year or 2 years, but it will fade. So memory, pain and happiness will go immediately after some time. Memory will last several years, This man said me like that, this class was wonderful like that. But after some time, memory also will fade. But sanskara, these subtle impressions will not fade. And those sanskaras, they are the chitta storehouse. And then we don't know, they are there inside, they are good and bad both. And Swami Shivananda Maharaj says that it's a very powerful tool which you have. At last point in your life also, it can give you strength and power. You never underestimate. It can give you bad sanskara also, but there are good sanskara also. And because you have been born as a human being, you have got both, good and bad sanskara. Both are there. And even if bad sanskaras reflect, we should not be dejected because there is another counter force which is also there, it can also come to our help. So we should never underestimate our inner ability which is silent, which is not known. It is not the power of mind, not the power of intellect. It might not have expressed, but it is there inside. But those sanskaras will come as vrittis. They will come as thoughts. And one more factor, external environment. External environment. So, external environment also has a role to play. But the Mahapurushas explain that the power of the external circumstances is much lower compared to the power of inner sanskara. And that is why Antarkarana Shuddhi Now the sadhana, that is very important. That if not today, it is going to have a dividend which will come to you as bonus share, whatever you call it, at any point of time, and that will benefit us. And Krishnanandaji Maharaj also has said that the influence of the external factors is higher in lower forms of life. Supposing plant is there, it will have more influence on the external compared to internal. As you go up, as you go animals, and like that, then the influence of the internal factor is much more compared to external. So that is how both is a source of strength and can also be a cause of concern. Like that. So that's the whole thing we need to understand about the metaphysics of human being. And this metaphor we understand here that ultimately when you see that Bhagavan is sitting as Sarthi, so what does it mean here? It means that not only ordinary vritti, but even Brahmakara vritti, when you do meditation, when you do any other thing also, that Brahmakara vritti, the one, not Vishakara vritti, also happens in intellect. So intellect, mind has got role. And that is why in that Gayatri mantra also we say, Dhiyo yo no prachodaya. That is a prayer. All other words are description of the word. Dhiyo yo no prachodaya. May my intellect be enlightened. So here when you say Bhagavan sitting as Sarthi and you compare the buddhi, it only means that two ways it can be understood. That that Brahmakara vritti can also arise in that buddhi. That is one way you can look at it. And second thing is, in the buddhi is the deciding factor. So it tells us what we should do, what we should not do in life. So in that place, instead of any other things, what is the will of God? What is the thought of God? What is the message of God? That I should make it as a part of my buddhi. And God has given such a beautiful intellect, it may not be used for any ordinary things. If we do not do it, no great harm will take place. But for revelation of that higher reality, I should use my intellect. And for that, I should follow what Bhagavan has said in Bhagavad Gita, what Gurudeva has said about Bhagavad Gita. So that is how we need to understand about Bhagavan as Sarthi. So I always ask this question to many people, how to understand it. So I am making my own interpretation. That is how I reconcile myself. And then comes the Arjuna, who is the person who writes, and he does move this way, that way. So who is the Arjuna? The Arjuna is we who are. And what are we? When we call Jivatma, or when we call the worldly man. Ultimately, when you say the Swami of the Ras has to be internal, has to be enduring God. It can't be anything lesser than that. So, if you look at Arjuna, who is the Swami of the Ras, as his essential self, as his divine self, then everything is justified. So when you say ultimately Antaryami, Ishvara only has to be that rider. But then, here what happens is that Arjuna, if you consider in the innermost self as Atman, then it is fine. But the problem here is that the innermost self in ourselves, or the Atman, what we call ourselves, is in a misplaced position. Correct? Is in a misplaced position. And that is why it is Jivatma. So what's the misplaced position? As I say, in a very simple way, even if you don't go for the Panchakosh Viveka also, in a very simple way we say that who is the human being? Human being is spirit in essence, soul in essence, which is encased in matter. Encased in matter. So matter is what? Body, mind and the intellect. In a very simple way, if you want to go, D, M, I. So we have got a physical personality, we have got mental personality, we have got psychological personality. So spirit, man is what? Spirit embedded or engrossed or enveloped by matter. Now this matter has also come from the spirit only. Correct? That is where the Maya and the Prakriti comes into play. That part apart. So that has come into that these three adjuncts are there. These are called as adjuncts. Now as long as spirit is embedded or encased by them, there is no problem. But when he gets involved in them, then the entire problem starts. So if the body is got there, body has got fragility, limitations, The moment I identify myself with the body, that I am short, I am tall, this problem, that problem, the more you identify with the problem, then body becomes a cause of concern. By itself, it is not a cause of concern. It helps us, in fact, to attain to that state. It's a tool given to us. But the moment we don't use it rightly, and we identify as body as me only, and when you say body, mind and intellect, they are not different from the Atman. Atman is, it is because of the Atman they have come into being. Correct? So that is not there. But then they have got some distinct characteristics, which is called Nama and Rupa. And that is where the Atman is differentiated from that. So if I identify ourselves with the body completely, in its physical form and its mental form, then the problem. Likewise, with the uncertainties and the agitations of the mind. There can be mind, can we have a lot of agitation sometimes, something happy, something not happy. But even if you ignore, if you don't associate with the mind, just as mind we are withdrawing from senses, we can withdraw it from the spirit, we can withdraw from the mind. Second level withdraw, they said, Then also mind is not a problem, it is also a helpful tool. And likewise, there are sort of despondencies of the intellect, So if we don't associate with that despondency, then intellect also is not a problem. As we say, intellect is also helpful right now. Correct? So these are the adjuncts which are given. And man is enveloped or engrossed in these adjuncts. We have to use them as a tool, as the helping media, not get associated. And because the man gets associated, involved there, that is how the whole problem of psychological breakdown, nervousness, losing his initial self. In the entire Bhagavad Gita, or all the scriptures, basically they help us in rediscovering himself. They help us in rediscovering himself. That he is a man who lost his track, he got beaten and he is just struggling, and they only tell us that just you're slightly off the track, this is not what you are is this. So in that Yoga Sutra class also, you are studying, there are 5 kinds of kleshas are there, correct? Avidya, Asmita, Ragadvesha and Abhinivesha. So when we identify ourselves, maybe we can see a little more later also, but when we identify ourselves with these adjuncts, mainly body, mind, intellect, all these kleshas take precedence. And spiritually, if you consider also, in that case also, once you are stricken by this ignorance of the self, as I say, it leads to moha and shoka. It leads to moha and shoka. So moha is knowing things in a perverse way, not in the right way. And shoka is the pain, the grief which is associated. The entire message of Bhagavad Gita in that sense is like this, that we have to readjust ourselves, realign ourselves, reinvent ourselves. We have forgotten who we are, and these great Purushas tell us what we are. And tomorrow we will try to take it forward. Swami Sivananda Maharaj, the great people, they say in a very simple way. When he says there are 2 ways you can do it. One is a priori method, and one is a posteriori method. Very interesting word that. So priori means directly addresses the soul. This is what you are. No nonsense, nothing else like that. And posteriori means okay, wherever you are, no problem. The man is depressed, continue, no problem like that. Then you take other help, art, yoga, science, this and that, and from effect to take him to the cause. The entire Bhagavad Gita is like that. In 2nd chapter, straight messages are about the Atman in 2nd chapter. But because Arjuna cannot take it, all other things out. So one is priori method, direct contemplation of the self, and second is posterior. No hurry. Just take yourself, do karma yoga, purify yourself, do upasana, and gradually everything. This is how the whole thing is there. Alright? So we offer our prostrations to Divine Mother, in whose inspiration this is sharing we are able to make it, and may her grace enable it to take it forward, not just for the classes, but as a part of our teaching. May Divine Mother and Guru's grace every one of us is my